What's good, YouTube? Ryan Rookert here with Scrubs Unite, showing off my old school favorite play map, the Yu-Gi-Oh versus Pokemon map. I actually wanted to bring a stack to you. This is just kind of an idea I wanted to do, and I'm thinking about making a series out of this from ban list to ban list, and it's my top 10 low budget tech cards that could potentially be game-breaking in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! So we'll start right off with Eater of Millions. You know, a lot of people are still running Eater of Millions on a consistent basis, mostly Trickstar players. It's good removal. It covers itself. If you could just put anti-destruction effects on this thing, like with a Forbidden Lance or some crap, you've actually got yourself a pretty strong factor of removal, and you really don't have to worry about much in the ways of cost on it, because 5 from your extra deck, since we're dealing with mostly Pendulum heavy decks and Trickstars now. Trickstars don't really use an extra deck, and Pendulum Magicians tend to have enough cards in their extra deck at all times to be able to resurface and kind of resurge their extra deck and just fill the field with a Pendulum Summon anyway. So this card right here is just really it's underrated except by Trickstar players. You don't really see many Pendulum Magician invoked or anything playing it, but I really think this card could actually make a good play itself inside of just about any sideboard. Next, we have Guiding Ariadne. Guiding Ariadne is, you know, a staple in Counter Fairies, but I also wanted to bring it up as a possibility for just a sideboard in general. You know, we got Solemn Judgment back. We've got Bottomless and Torrential at 3, which Bottomless and Torrential is inconsequential for Ariadne, but it shows that trap cards are either not cared about in general anymore, or that some people are putting a lot of stock into trap cards and hoping to bring them back. Guiding Ariadne lets you do that with the counter traps like the Solemns. Being able to play your Solemns without cost, being able to search for your Solemns. All of that's a very good combination setup, and it allows for you to be able to play cards that you normally wouldn't be able to play, stuff like Divine Punishment and such like that. But that overall is a really good tech card in, and a scale 3 makes it sort of easy to play some of the medium to higher scales in some decks. I'm actually thinking of trying to tech this in the sideboard for Zephyra. Lecter Pendulum, the Drake Overlord. Negate the effect of face-up Pendulum monsters while your opponent controls them if it's in your Pendulum zone, or if it's in your scale. So, you're now sitting on a Pendulum-based skill drain. And that's really good for a lot of different reasons. Because if you play the Lecter Pendulum against the Pen Magician matchup, they have to go Purple Poison or some kind of spot removal to clear it off the field. And in the meantime, that's stalling out their plays and making them go neg to have to get rid of one resource that you have. And the resource that you have really isn't that important of a play. On top of that, a scale 5, you can throw it with any of the scale 1s for a lot of different decks, and you can play that route. You can also tech this into stuff like Zephyra. You can tag it into the Mythical Beast archetype, because Mythical Beasts are mostly scale 4, but you can combo this into the 5s and throw some 1s in there and get to most of your big playmakers that you need. Next is the Retaliating Sea. I know a lot of people have been saying Contacting the Sea is going to be one of the next great hand traps, and I agree with that. But I think that Retaliating Sea really has a lot more potential behind it than what people are giving credit for. Because if your opponent activates a spell card that includes the special summon of a monster's, you can special summon this card from your hand. If summoned this way while this card is on the field, any card sent to the graveyard is banished instead. And if this card is sent to the graveyard from the field, you can add an Earth Insect with 15 or less from your deck to your hand. You can't search Max Sea anymore, but it becomes a searcher for any of your other sea cards. You're Contacting the Sea and any of your others that are actually low attack point and low value. So this card kind of helps trim things out, and even if you really don't need the banish effect, it's still a nice 1400 body, and you can throw it out there just for a cheap link summon. Last but not least, this one's kind of a tech up to your own opinion. Earthbound Immortal Asilapiscu. Asilapiscu, a lot of people discredit Earthbound Immortals. Oh, there's no real way to get them out on the field fast enough. You know, why not just run Sphere mode? You know, you can run anything that'd be better than an Earthbound Immortal. Even Malefics are better. And that's true. That's very true. But if you can manage to special this out somehow, like with the Supreme King Gates, you really get a good benefit off of it. because if there's a field spell on the field, Trickstar, Spiral, Invoked, ABC, they all run field spells, I think. So, this can stay on the field and serve as a good 25 body that can just proceed to work as a beat stick on everything and even attack direct if you feel like it. And if she's destroyed by any removal at all, as long as it's not her own effect, she blows up the entire board, and for every monster, your opponent gets burned. And that's a good 800 for each monster burn. So, they get a big board, they get a big field going, and then they pop a Silipiscu on summon. That's fine. A Silipiscu goes off, pops their 4 to 6 monster board, and they're taking between 32 to 4,800 burn on that. Even against the slower decks, it's still 8 to 1,600 burn, which is still a Solemn Warning's worth of punishment to them. So that's really something that you can consider if you feel like throwing that into your side deck and seeing what you can do with it. Going into the spell options, we have the Book of Moon. It's a natural. There's a reason this card's not coming back from 1. If it does, it'll go to 2. It'll never come back to 3. Book of Moon flips monsters face down, stops them from being able to use in Link Summon. Sure, it doesn't stop their effects from activating, but if I'm going to knock your monster into face down defense position and you can't Link Summon with it, I've just took a chunk out of your combo play, and with a chunk out of your combo play, then that means that your turn's not going to have as much of an extender on it, unless you have a secondary extender that you're willing to expend earlier on in the turn, and that's just going to cost you more in the long run. So that's always a good play. To counteract the evenly matched, I'm not a big fan of running Mind Crush, because Mind Crush, I know that people say it takes a scrub to do it. I am a scrub, and I would do it. You can go empty battle phase, let them call Mind Crush on evenly matched. There's no evenly matched in your hand, and now they lose a card. Why not just make it easy and run Drag Down? It's a -1, sure, on your part. You still end up losing an extra card out of your hand, and your opponent gets hand knowledge too. But with the turn player changing their hand so much on the first turn or two of the game, really that hand knowledge does not matter beyond the first play. And with Drag Down, you can rip an Ash Blossom from their hand, and that takes a huge advantage away from them. You can rip the Ghost Ogre, you can rip the Sphere Mode or the Kaiju, you can rip even the evenly matched straight out of their hand, and that's something that you really don't have to deal with later. Yes, they get a draw to replace it, but the odds of them drawing back into that same card with 1 less of it in the deck and 1 less of it in your hand is really going to be a penalizing hit. So I would really rather run the Drag Down into the grave, because I don't want to have to deal with losing a Mind Crush and potentially another card for being faked out on it and getting hand knowledge out of it, when I can guarantee to rip something from my opponent's hand and not have to take the risk of not being able to remove something. I'd much rather rip it. Pendulum Storm is coming back, in my opinion. I really think that Pendulum Storm is going to be good against the Pendulum Magician matchup, the Zephyr matchup, the Cleafort matchup, the Metal Foes matchup. All of these decks that are really going to be Pendulum reliant, this card is going to be really good against, because you can blow up the 2 Pendulum Scale as well, and then you get to pop an extra spell or trap out of nowhere. So you can even get like a twin pop on the Pen Scale, and then even blind shot into a Solemn Warning. Of course, it's susceptible to Judgment. What isn't susceptible to Judgment? You can but if your opponent drops that Judgment to protect their scales, that's still a life point chunk that they probably weren't willing to lose in the first place. And you can actually combo up on this by popping the back row, getting it negated on the pops, and then play into something like another Pendulum Storm, or even you can play Hey Trunade beforehand and then Pendulum Storm, and it removes your opponent's back row, and there's really no coming back from it on an easy path. Next card that people don't consider very often is Ground Claps. Ground Claps by itself is a very powerful card. Stops up 2 zones. It's kind of the Ojama duo, but you don't give your opponent any monsters to link off of with. So, Ground Claps in itself can stop the link arrows, it can stop the combinations with the links, And if you know your opponent's generic play, you know, ABC goes into Decode Talker, ABC Dragon Buster, you can remove the Decode Talker from the equation just by making them have to go straight into Dragon Buster, because they have to get rid of the Ground Claps if they don't have Twin Twister or Cosmic Cyclone. Last but not least is Gozen Match. Some people say there can only be one because it hits a lot of other decks, and I agree with that. But there's also a lot of decks currently out there that run multiple attributes, like Pendulum Magicians, Invoked, stuff like that, that run different attributes with different setups. Even Draco gets hit by this. So it's kind of a way of restricting some of the heavier decks that just rely on multiple attributed cards. And there can be only one would be a much better tech than this, but I would rather run the Gozen Match at the moment because I don't have there can be only one. But that's my 10 cards, 10 underrated tech cards for the February 2018 format. Like, comment, subscribe, it'd be appreciated. Thanks, YouTube.